Hello and welcome to this Fox 505 feed special. I am Chad Brummett. Now, we are less than 30 minutes away from the Democratic gubernatorial candidates live Q&A. That's happening on Fox 505. Now, this preview program is live on our CTV streaming service, KRQE Now, as well as YouTube. Now, over the next half hour, we will be getting you ready for this live Q&A with the two candidates, former Interior Secretary and Congresswoman Deb Haaland and current Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman. We will be checking in with our political analyst and University of New Mexico professor Gabe Sanchez to get his input on what each candidate has to do tonight. But first, KRQE and Emerson College released a poll concerning the race for governor. Now, we have a weekly political show called Political Power Ranker that delves deeper into polling results. Now, they spoke about the logistics of the poll and the data inside the numbers. And here are the hosts, Next Star Political Content Director Chris Berg and Spencer Kimball of Emerson College Polling.
Did a poll in New Mexico, and Spence, good to see you. Tell us a little bit about the poll.
Well, Chris, thank you, and looking forward to talking about the land of enchantment today. And as we can see here, we split this up between Republican and Democratic primary voters. So what we'll first look at here are the Democratic primary voters, likely voters. You'll see that this group is slightly younger, a little bit more female, because that's who the Democratic electorate is going to look like. And we had about 564 people take the survey using texting, email, and some online sample. And of course, we thank everybody for participating in this study.
Excellent. So let's get to the top line for the Dems. Who's got the lead and why?
Well, we got an open governor's race here in New Mexico. So we took a look at both sides, Democrat and Republican primaries. And what we see here on the Democratic side is Deb Haaland up about 40-24 over Sam Bregman. Haaland has support within the Democratic voter. She's winning that group of voters 48-23, but Bregman is winning with independents. And New Mexico now has a semi-open primary where independents can vote in the primary, but Bregman would need to bring out a tremendous turnout at this point. However, 40-24 suggests that while Haaland has a lead, it is not insurmountable at this time.
With her name recognition in the state as a former Secretary of the Interior, I'm surprised to see that the undecided is that high. Are you?
Yeah, that raised an eyebrow because I thought she'd be up by a much larger margin. When we take a look at like the Senate race, you'll see Hickenlooper doing a slightly better. And based on that name recognition, we thought she'd be further ahead. However, she does have a significant lead. We'll see if she can hold it. She wins across all age groups. So there's not a clear base of support for Sam to be able to take her out. But she is under that 50% threshold, and that gives her opponent an opportunity to try to create an upset.
Now, the political trackers show went further into what is behind the numbers and might give Sam Bregman hope to turn the undecideds to his camp. KRQE evening anchor Dean Staley joined them to explain why this is a live Q&A special and not a debate.
Spence, anything else that jumps out at you from a crosstab perspective that would say, you know, Sam Bregman needs to do X in order to close the gap?
Well, he's got to find his base of support, and that might come from male voters without college degrees. We see a softening within that demographic group, but Haaland has got a big lead with female voters, and in the Democratic primary, females will outvote males, by about 10, 15 points. So that's a strong base that she has coming out. I presume that she's sitting up there and doesn't really want to do anything to, change the course of the race. So she'll probably try to stay on that sideline, try to have more of a manufactured campaign. As Dean said, she's not out maybe on the campaign trail, potentially saying something that she needs to take back. So she's in a very controlled environment. She has the edge, and if she can run the clock out, she could get the nomination just with that. Bregman's going to have to come out and really fight for a debate. He's going to need to have some focusing event, game changer to move the needle. The voters are open to potentially moving from one to the other, but without that event, I think the status quo will be to Haaland's benefit.
And to that point, Dean, you guys have something set up with both candidates, but it's not a debate. So tell us about it and how did it create, why is it in the form it's going to be in?
Well, I think you just heard why. We offered a debate to both candidates, to all of the candidates in both parties, but to both of the Democratic candidates. Haaland would not debate Sam Bregman. Sam Bregman was absolutely wanted a debate, right? Because he has to make up ground, and he feels like he can perform in that environment. Deb Haaland is so far ahead right now. She feels like she's sort of playing, this is that point where a candidate plays defense. So what we ended up with were, these will be live interviews with me and my co-anchor, each of us interviewing one of the candidates back to back, live in studio, no editing, absolutely live, no questions ahead of time. So we'll get our best shot at these candidates, but they will not be engaging each other during a debate. So that is a real miss for Sam Bregman in terms of an opportunity to go at Deb Haaland and try to close this gap.
Now, this is a weekly show that you can catch on our CTV streaming service, KRQE Now. It airs every Friday at 1 p.m. You can stay caught up on the latest in political politics and political polling, that is. Chris Berg and Spencer Kimball will break down the latest national and state polling on the hottest races across the country as we get closer to the November midterm elections. Well, we are just getting started on this Fox 505 feed special previewing the live Democratic gubernatorial Q&A. When we come back, we will be talking with our political analyst to get his insights into tonight's Q&A and what each candidate needs to do to win. Well, ahead of News 13's live Q&A special tonight with Democratic gubernatorial candidates Deb Haaland and Sam Bregman, we wanted to find out what candidates need to do and need to avoid in order to shift the needle of their respective campaigns. We are joined by News 13's political analyst and a UNM professor, Gabe Sanchez, to break all of this down. Gabe, thanks for taking a few minutes to talk about this before we have our Q&A session tonight. Now, our recent polling, you and I have spoken about this, recent polling with Emerson College shows that Deb Haaland has a 16-point lead over Sam Bregman. What do each of the candidates need to do tonight going into this based on where we are right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's exciting. We're right here at the cusp of it. Voting places are already open, and we have an opportunity for both of the candidates on the Democratic side potentially to give their last opportunity for voters on a big stage for KRQE in this back and forth session. So it's a really big deal. I think more so for Bregman than it is for Haaland. Primarily, as you noted, she's essentially had the advantage across polling from the beginning of the race when both candidates, were announced. And if anything, I think over time, she's somewhat expanded on her lead. In fact, the latest Albuquerque Journal poll has her breaking that magic 50% number. That's what all candidates want to see in any statewide polling. She got up to 52% to 30% for Bregman. So I think moving into this, I think Haaland has to continue doing what she's doing, essentially allowing her name recognition, allowing her traction with the Democratic base in the state to still be with her and behind her and not make any major missteps on a big stage like this. I think if we hear that essentially it was a break-even, back and forth conversation, and nobody was essentially victorious, that's a win for Haaland because she doesn't have to make up any ground. Flip side of that is this is potentially the one opportunity that Bregman has to shift the narrative on the race and have people believe that he actually has a greater chance of winning than the polls are suggesting. So he has to come out of this, and after Tuesday evening, we all have to be talking about how well Bregman did, how he cemented himself as the person savvier on policy. Those things have to be the narrative for him to feel like he used this opportunity to actually pick up some ground.
Gotcha. Now, speaking of what they need to do, how about things that they need to avoid? Are there things that Haaland needs to be mindful of and Bregman needs to be mindful of going into tonight?
Well, I think they know very well what their strengths and weaknesses are. And, Haaland's, potential weakness is nuances of getting into the weeds on public policies. And that's probably why this is a big advantage for her. The makeup of this event isn't going to be a back and forth debate. It's somewhat controlled. It's a better opportunity, I think, for Haaland to get her points across without having to get back and forth and trade dialogue with Bregman, who loves the camera. He loves the big stage. We would assume he would be better in that back and forth trade-off. So I think the fact that it's much more of a question and answer session, essentially, I think plays better for Haaland because it does not force her into a situation where she might have to go back and forth with Bregman, who would probably take advantage of any opportunity he has to get into somewhat of an exchange.
Gotcha. Now, one thing that we have kind of noticed that, it doesn't seem that Secretary Haaland has been out on, campaign events or things like that. We're seeing the advertisements on air, but it doesn't seem that she has been super aggressive on this campaign trail. Obviously, things have been working well for her. Has this been a smart tactic to just kind of let that name recognition and her sort of CV, as it were, to kind of speak for itself?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, right? And I think it speaks to the resources that both the Haaland and Bregman campaign have available to them. Haaland has a name recognition resource that you just simply cannot buy with money. I mean, it's something that you either have or you don't. She has that as a resource, and she has a tremendous funding advantage. And when you have that level of war chest, I think it does make sense strategically to utilize that to get out on air as heavily as she has been. And she has the amount of money necessary to continue and increase that barrage of TV ad time down the home stretch of the campaign. So with those level of resources, strategically, it might make sense to not have her out, beating the bushes, campaign trail after campaign trail. She might not need to do that as much as Bregman does because she just has that underlying name recognition as a resource going into the election to begin with.
Gotcha. Now, we had previously spoken about this too, Gabe, but interested in kind of unpacking a bit of these numbers. Our polling showed that Haaland support narrows among men and voters without a college degree, but it was higher than the average for women. What moves do you think that Sam Bregman needs to make? Because obviously in certain parts of this polling area, he is doing better. What does he need to do tonight to close these gaps? Is there things that he can do to sort of minimize the gaps that exist, or even capitalize on some of the gains that he has with men and with those without college degrees?
Yeah, I think those two underlying demographics, right, particularly those with high level of college degrees, right, higher level of education, what that generally speaks to is potentially being more moderate in terms of their policy views, more educated and sophisticated on the nuances of policy. So I think he has to leave the stage essentially making clear when it comes to the specifics of public policy and his plans to address really important things like the economy and crime in the state, that people come out of that saying, I trust him better on the issues. And I think that's going to play to the strengths he has in those underlying demographics, because not only does he have to broaden his tent and try to bring in some of those folks that he's not doing as well with, he has to make sure that the energy and enthusiasm among his base, those subgroups, turn out in high numbers. I think that's got to be key for him. The subgroup that I think is the key for any prospects of Bregman, closing this gap and us talking about on election night the potential for him to come from behind and pull this out, are these independent voters. Let's remind viewers out there, because I think this is brand new and a lot of people still aren't quite sure how it's going to play out. But remember, for the first time in state history, independent voters, those who are declined to state, who are not Democrat or Republican in their party affiliation, have the opportunity to participate in this primary. And we don't really know how many of those folks will actually turn out and which direction they might vote for. My perception is a lot of those folks might be moderate Democrats that might swing back and forth between Republican Democratic Party and how they think about statewide politics. If Bregman can carry a large segment, and I will say he needs the lion's share of those voters, and let's remember, it's 26% of all registered voters in the state are declined to state independent voters. That's a lot of folks out there. If he can bring in the vast majority of those, you look at the math and this becomes a much tighter race. That, I think, is key for him. He's got to make that happen with this opportunity he has on a big network, a big stage. If he does that, this might actually become tighter than we think it is based on polling.
Gotcha. One of the issues, too, that our polling showed that I thought was kind of interesting, nearly half of likely voters, 49%, in fact, say that they feel less safe today than they did a year ago. Now, I know that in the sort of the court of public opinion and a lot of conversation, you hear especially Republican lawmakers saying that Democrats oftentimes are softer on crime. However, the Harvard Gazette has an article just reading here based on a study that they conducted in 2024 saying that the numbers don't actually add up to that. Out of 400 U.S. cities over nearly 3 decades, political affiliation of mayors made little difference when it comes to crime rates and policing. So even if studies are saying that may not be the case, there is this perception that the GOP may be more tough on crime. Is that something that both Haaland and Bregman need to take into consideration on their calculus moving forward?
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's that oftentimes when we're looking at data, particularly polling data, perception oftentimes is more powerful than reality. Right. So as you noted, there's a perception that Democrats tend to be weak on crime. And even in the face of facts, right, a lot of voters are perceiving, hey, if we're going to have another 4 to 8 years of Democratic control of state government, which of those two candidates do we perceive as about the quote unquote perceived crime challenge in New Mexico? And that's another thing in terms of perception versus reality. Most of the hard data, and a lot of our elected officials in office right now like to cite that data, suggests crime is actually on a downturn across the state in most major crime categories. But as you noted, you ask people in a poll, do they feel more or less safe? Better or worse, a vast segment of the population feels less safe than they did a year ago or 4 years ago. So that's another dynamic of perception driving reality, right? And so as a result of that, I think both candidates have to have strong messaging. What exactly are you going to do about crime? What is your plan? And the key is, I think, voters have to perceive that the candidates understand where they are on this issue. They don't feel safe. Candidates, either one of them, Bregman or Haaland, right? If they miscalculate that dynamic and start talking about hard numbers and say, actually, crime is on the downturn and actually things are looking better, when the public doesn't feel safe, that's the type of thing that can lead to some challenges with the electorate, because they're going to perceive you don't understand the reality of what's going on the ground. I think both candidates have to be very careful of not falling into that potential trap.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Gabe, these are all fantastic points. We appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for always bringing your insight and your analysis.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
much appreciate the opportunity to always talk New Mexico politics with the team.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, Gabe. Thank you so much. Folks, stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back, folks. Our KRQE Emerson poll asked New Mexicans, what are the biggest issues facing our state? And the results were surprising compared to the rest of the country. The Political Power Ranker crew discussed those results with Dean and what candidates will have to do tonight to separate themselves from each other.
So, Spence, we do have to talk about some of the challenges they face, though, the people for the people who do live there. And you're seeing something that's kind of interesting. It doesn't really line up with the rest of the country. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so when, Chris, we jump into these states, we ask, what's your most important issue? And we ask the same series of issue questions. And if you recall last week when we were in California, the big issue was the economy and affordability, over 60%. And even when we were in Minnesota, we were talking about threats to democracy. Here in New Mexico, it is different. You might think that immigration would be a top issue as a border state, but that's not the case. What we're seeing is the economy is still a big issue, but healthcare is just as big. It'll be interesting to hear what's happening in the healthcare. And it's more than just like Democrats saying healthcare is a big issue. The Republicans are up there over 20% saying that it's a big issue. Education is also a big issue across the board for Democrats and Republicans, pretty consistently. But then we get into like crime. Crime's a big issue. Again, we don't see these numbers even in New York City where people were reporting high crime. But the crime issue is more between Republicans and the independents. And then as we look down that list, housing affordability is more of an issue for the Democrats and the independents. And then threats to democracy is a bigger issue for those Democrats. So as we start looking at these issues here in New Mexico, you can see where the Republicans kind of line up. They'll be their talking points on the campaign trail, and the Democrats as well. But it seems like overall that the issues in New Mexico are different than what we're seeing nationally.
Dean, that's something that you being a lifelong, almost a life, well, born there, raised there, grew up there, came back after you took a couple stints elsewhere. I mean, crime has always been something that has been front and center. Some of the most unusual crime events have happened in my career, have happened in New Mexico, and Breaking Bad to some people isn't the show isn't too far from the truth. Others would argue. But talk to us a little bit about that, and then we'll go into healthcare.
Well, yeah, these are really interesting polling numbers, Chris. And let me say, first of all, my training is as a reporter, so I sort of have an allergy to conjecture and to guessing at stuff. But I do think I have some insight here. When you're talking about crime, and the crime numbers in the Albuquerque metro and across the state have come down. You're talking about violent crime and even property crimes have come down dramatically in the last 18 months to 2 years. So these numbers aren't really tracking with the fact that things have gotten much safer. And I'm talking about some really dramatic drops, like double-digit drops in some of these categories. So my thinking on that is that I think that crime was so bad for a long time here in New Mexico that there are people who maybe haven't gotten past that, where it gets so bad that everyone feels like they know someone who has been, oh, your car was broken into, or your truck was stolen, or your house was broken, or you had a friend who was a victim of a violent crime. So I feel like there may be something there. I also feel like, and Chris, having lived and worked here in Albuquerque, Albuquerque is a dominant part of the demographic in New Mexico. Half the people in New Mexico roughly live in the Albuquerque metro area, right? And Albuquerque is not a typical metro. Like you think of Phoenix, you have all these suburbs, Chandler, Mesa, these different suburbs that I think feel dramatically safer than the rest of Phoenix. You're in your own little community. If someone's in your neighborhood that doesn't belong, they stand out. And Albuquerque, I think, is fair, having lived all around the country, including places like Minneapolis and Seattle and Atlanta, really stands out as a place where it's very mixed. There are very few places in Albuquerque that are sort of set aside communities. Yeah, I mean, Rio Rancho is one of our only real suburbs, Otherwise, you have 500,000 people here who don't live behind, gated communities or in neighborhoods like that. So I think that may have something to do with these crime numbers, that this is still stuck in the psyche of New Mexicans. This does not surprise me.
All right, folks. Well, that is going to do it for this special edition of the Fox 505 Feed Special. You can catch us live every Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 a.m. on the Fox 505 and on the KRQE Now streaming service. It is now time for the Democratic gubernatorial candidates live Q&A hosted by Dean Staley and Jessica Garate. Now, we will also have a post-show breakdown hosted by New Mexico News insiders Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee. That is live on KRQE Now as well as our YouTube page. We will also dive deep into every big moment that happens this evening, tomorrow morning on the Fox 505 feed. Again, that starts at 7 a.m. Thank you for joining us.
It's decision time in the land of enchantment. Who will be New Mexico's next leader? In the governor's race, 2 Democrats are vying for their party's nomination ahead of the June 2nd primary. Former Congresswoman and U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland and Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman. Tonight we hear from both Democratic candidates in a live KRQE Q&A special. Good evening and welcome to this KRQE primary election special. Tonight's format consists of live one-on-one conversations with each Democratic candidate for governor running back to back. The candidates agreed to this format after we invited them to participate in a live debate. Sam Bregman agreed to our debate. Deb Haaland declined. Our first Q&A tonight, as decided by coin toss, is with Deb Haaland.
Deb Haaland, a member of the Laguna Pueblo, is a 35th generation New Mexican. After graduating from Highland High School, Haaland has been open about overcoming alcoholism, going on to graduate from the University of New Mexico with English and law degrees. Haaland would become a tribal administrator at San Felipe Pueblo and a member of the Laguna Development Corporation Board of Directors. In 2014, she ran unsuccessfully for New Mexico Lieutenant Governor. She then chaired the state's Democratic Party. In 2018, Haaland made history as one of the first Native American women elected to Congress. And in 2020, President Joe Biden would tap Haaland to be the Secretary of Interior, the first Native American cabinet secretary in our nation's history, launching her into the national spotlight.
And I would like to welcome Secretary Haaland. Welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And we just want to start first off with healthcare, which has ranked first in a KRQE Emerson poll as the most important issue for voters this year. You praised our state for spending $300 million to backfill federal cuts to the Affordable Care Act. Yes or no? If you are elected governor, would you ask the legislature to do it again next year?
Absolutely. We need it, right? People can't go up without health care. And if they don't get the care they need, when they're sick immediately, those problems snowball and it becomes much more expensive for our state. And so with the Medicaid cuts that is happening from the Trump administration, we absolutely need to make sure that every New Mexican has health care. But I also want to work toward a public option so we can really make sure that every New Mexican can get the care they need.
Is it fair to ask New Mexico taxpayers to pay for subsidies the federal government won't?
So look, what I'm thinking is that if we're going to have to foot the bill anyway, if there's no federal funding to put toward that the cuts that Trump is making, we can't let New Mexicans go without health care. It becomes very expensive if you don't take care of issues immediately. My thought is if we have healthier communities, health care costs go down.
New Mexico is still experiencing a massive doctor shortage. Your health care plan acknowledges that we need more doctors, but where will they come from? And how much would your health care proposal cost?
So what I'm thinking is I had a chance to meet with a group of residents who are doing their residencies right here in New Mexico. They're born and raised here. They graduated from New Mexico Medical School, and they're here because they love New Mexico. It's hard for them to pay their rent, pay their student loans, raise their children, all on the salary that they get. So my thought is that if we can pay residents a little more, make sure that they can afford to make their bills, that we can have more residents staying right here instead of going to other states for their residencies. That will help us with the doctor shortage. I also believe very strongly that if children can read sooner, if we get better scores in our public schools, that more doctors, that is one issue that they will not have to worry about. They can come to New Mexico knowing that we have good schools ready for their families.
And Secretary, do you have a specific cost on how much your health care proposals would be?
I don't have a specific cost, and that was the reason that the governor and the legislature got together initially, was to talk about what they felt they needed. But of course, health care is something that every single New Mexican deserves, and so I will look forward to having those conversations.
without having an idea of how much this is going to cost us? How do we plan for it?
Indeed. Well, thankfully, we do have funds in our state funds to ensure that we can invest in New Mexicans. And as I said, I look forward to having those conversations and looking at how much we will need to make sure that New Mexicans can see a doctor when they're sick.
Ms. Haaland, you have historically been against fracking. In Congress, you supported the new Green Deal. You said, quote, you were wholeheartedly against fracking on public lands. Yes or no, is that still your stance?
Fracking on public lands? Absolutely, yes. I mean, look, we have a thriving gas and oil industry here in New Mexico, and I have no intention of, stopping people's jobs. I think we can operate in a much cleaner way. One of the things that I'm proud of doing, of course, is protecting Chaco from gas and oil drilling. And look, there are places to drill, there are places not to drill. I think we can protect our public lands at the same time we're growing our economy and ensuring that we have the energy for tomorrow. That being said, we also need to move forward with our clean energy. We've made a promise to ourselves to move to zero emissions by 2050, and that would still be my plan.
Ms. Haaland, just so I'm clear, you said that yes, you would like to ban fracking on public lands?
So our public lands, we have enough private land here in New Mexico, and that's really where a lot of the gas and oil drilling is happening. State lands, of course, that we look at those. When I was Secretary of the Interior, we moved those gas and oil permits forward. We also were able to shrink the amount of land that those permits were
so yes or no?
On. I mean, yes. Yes, I think we need to take care of our public lands and have them there for future generations.
Oil and gas make up to 40% of our budget. How do we make up those losses if we're not drilling?
So drilling will still continue. New Mexico has one of the most productive gas and oil drilling in the country, and it will continue.
As governor, you want to take an environmental approach to this. What regulatory limitations on fracking would you place or expand on state public lands?
Well, I think we can really operate in a much cleaner way, right? And I know technology has really made some strides in the industry. The gas and oil leaders that I've spoken to, they want to operate in a much cleaner way. Our children deserve to have clean air, clean water, clean land, and I think that we can just make sure that we're protecting that future for our kids.
But how does that actually look? New Mexico already has some of the strictest regulations in the country already. What more would you add to those regulations?
Well, I think we should continue on those regulations and make sure that they're being enforced where they can be, and that we're working to make sure that we're employing the best technology as we move forward.
Wouldn't these regulations, though, make it more expensive, more difficult for companies, that they could potentially stop drilling in New Mexico and go to other states like Texas where they don't face these really strict regulations?
Yeah, my guess is that, well, they haven't stopped yet, and the regulations that the legislature has put in place already has not deterred them. I believe very strongly that we can have cleaner operations, and that's what I'll strive for.
And on the flip side of that, like a lot of people have said that with these regulations, environmentalists are saying that we don't do enough in enforcing them, that some of these companies would just rather pay the fine and keep going on doing business without. How do you hold those companies accountable?
Yeah, well, regulations should be followed, and if we need to, staff up, make sure that we have the people in place to address those issues, then that's what we should do.
Do you support large data center projects like Project Jupiter in southern New Mexico?
So I think we need guardrails on any new industries like data centers that are coming into New Mexico to make sure that we're protecting our precious natural resource of water. We absolutely don't have the water to spare. We're in a climate crisis, and we're in the high desert. So I think whatever industry comes to New Mexico should be sustainable, and that would include data centers.
What kind of guardrails are you looking at?
Guardrails against using water that could be used for life, for agriculture, right? We need to make sure that we are not just expending all of our opportunities for clean water on a data center such as the one that they're proposing.
Are you for moving forward? This Project Jupiter is already, I mean, they're full steam ahead. They've already started construction on this. How do you feel about that?
So I read that they have changed their way of fueling. You know, they're moving to fuel cells. They have stated that that will cut the water use down substantially. And so we'll just keep an eye on it, right? If it's in the works, I'm not governor yet.
The state has already invested a ton of money into quantum and AI. How do we keep being a leader in these emerging industries with these data centers and balancing that environmental impact?
So there are lots of places to build data centers. They don't all have to be in New Mexico, right? And we've read that they're booming all across the country. We just don't have the water to spare. And also what I'm saying about the data centers is that we have promised ourselves here in New Mexico that we want to get to zero emissions. And I think that whatever industry comes to New Mexico, they should want to also live up to that promise that we've made to ourselves. So I'm just saying we need sustainable industry here, and I think we can find sustainable industry, and I think we can find a way to make these industries sustainable.
When you come into office, Project Jupiter still opening? They still get all the permits, everything? Are you okay with them still being here?
So at that point, it's not. I'm not governor yet, as I mentioned. So at that point, what we need to do is just make sure that they're operating in the ways that they have promised, right? Community investments, clean energy, conserving water. These are all things that they, if those are the parameters that have been put on the data center, then of course we will need to make sure that they're living up to their promises.
And with that, we'll move on to our next question. The biggest attack from your opponent centers on a 2014 flight you took on a plane linked to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Can you explain the circumstances of that flight, and have you ever had any interaction with Epstein?
No, I've never had any interaction with that individual. And I mean, sure. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say that journalists and the media has stated that these are lies. And in fact, that ad was taken off one of the networks because of that. I want to say that I was, when you run for lieutenant governor, you don't have a choice of who your gubernatorial candidate is. I ran for lieutenant governor. I won my election. I was paired together with Gary King. Gary King arranged the flight and asked me if I would travel to Washington, D.C. with them to help the campaign. And so that's what I did. That was the circumstances. Jeffrey Epstein was a despicable human. I completely support the bipartisan commission at the legislature to hold anyone who committed crimes in relation to Jeffrey Epstein accountable, and that victims and survivors should have justice.
Ms. Haaland, some officials have been criticized for not raising concerns about President Biden's health. What did you know, and when did you know it?
Yes, well, as you could see, when I was Secretary of the Interior, I have a very long record of accomplishments there. We conserved millions of acres of land. We took 2 species off the endangered species list. We moved the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative forward. President Biden made an apology to Indian country. These were all things that I was able to accomplish because I had a partner in the White House. And so I will just say that from my view, I accomplished a lot because the president was supportive of the work we were doing, and I just didn't see. I didn't see that he was not hampering in any way, shape, or form to the work that we did.
You didn't have? Did you have any concerns about his health?
No, I did not. I did not see him in that way at all. He was always very, very good, very strong, very competent whenever I was around him.
Did you meet often?
Not often. I mean, you don't meet with the president often. I was working in my own building and taking official trips as necessary. And so, no, it's not like in the movies. You don't spend a lot of time with the president when you're the Secretary of the Interior.
Ms. Haaland, more than 70% of your listed campaign donations are from out-of-state donors. How can New Mexicans have confidence that you're representing their interests and not national progressive Democratic interests?
Thank you. So even though that number you stated is there, our average donation is $26. So we have a lot of people sending in $5 and $10 donations. And the donations that I've gotten from New Mexicans, tens of thousands of donations from across New Mexico, from every single county in New Mexico, it's still, the donations that I've gotten from New Mexicans still outnumbers the donations of other campaigns. So I feel confident that New Mexicans across the state are supporting me in this effort, and proud that, that yes, there are grassroots donors across the country. I have a national profile because I was Secretary of the Interior. I was able to accomplish things all across our country, and I'm grateful for that opportunity.
But you also have donations from billionaire J.B. Pritzker, almost $2 million alone from California, Elizabeth Warren. Again, almost $2 million alone from California. How do you explain those large donations?
So, I mean, someone like J.B. Pritzker, who's the governor of Illinois, he likely wants a good partner when, when he's serving a second term. That would be me. Elizabeth Warren is a dear friend. I've known her since before I was sworn into Congress. And so sure, I have made friendships and built relationships all over the country. And I'm grateful that, that people recognize that I have something of value to offer our state of New Mexico. And I mean, look, we're not an island here. New Mexico is part of the United States of America, and it will be important for all of leaders across the states to push back on the horrible policies that are coming out of this administration, all the Medicaid cuts, all the SNAP benefit cuts. We have a lot of work to do in the coming years. And so I recognize that perhaps people just feel that I can do the job.
We're going to turn to crime now. You're proposing an Office of Community Safety staffed with social workers to shift the burden off police. How would you make sure it's effective at incentivizing people to get off the streets and accept the help that they need?
So I think we need a lot of effort toward helping unhoused people to find, a place to live. I was very grateful to visit the Community of Hope. It's based in Las Cruces. It's wraparound services for people who are unhoused. They can go to that location. They can get a hot meal, take a shower, wash their clothes, and they can pitch their tents in a safe place. And so I think, I feel very strongly that we need to replicate programs like that around the state, because it's not going to, you can't just open one office and think we're going to solve the issue of homelessness. It will take a concerted effort, and it will take a concerted effort in many places across the state. And so that's what I'm ready to do. This is an issue that is not good for anyone. It's an unhealthy situation for so many people. And look, law enforcement should concentrate on what they're trained to do, getting violent criminals off our streets, getting illegal drugs off our streets, and addressing real crime, while the behavioral health issues should be left to those professionals.
What happens when they don't want help? We report on this all the time, and we see it over and over again, where we do have a similar program here in Albuquerque, ACS, where these providers go, they work with the homeless, and the homeless, hey, they're telling us like up to 90% of the time they don't want to get help. And so these businesses that have called the city, have called police, have called for help, they're still in the same situation because these homeless people are still camping out at their businesses and not getting the help they need. How do you make them get that help?
Well, we need to keep working at it. We'll just have to keep working at it.
You've also talked about shifting focus from incarceration to treatment, but how will you address what's already a shortage of beds and providers in the state?
Yes, we need more rehab centers here, right? We need to use behavioral health dollars to make sure we have a place for people to go who want to address their substance use.
But how do we, I mean, we've been trying to address the situation and we still are so short treatment centers here.
Yes, well, we need more treatment centers, obviously. Yes, we need to build those up.
You also talk about accountability systems, but what does that mean in practice? Changes to sentencing, pretrial detention, or police oversight? Like, what does that mean?
So, when I talk about getting to the root causes of crime, we see a lot of times that there's a revolving door, right? People, they go into jail, they get out, they go back into jail, they get out. We don't address the real issues that people are suffering from. Is it behavioral health? Is it substance use? Is it, what is it? And we also see that many times crime is generational. We need to address those issues. We need to get to the root causes of crime so that people can actually change their lives. I believe very strongly that people can change. We shouldn't give up on people so easily. Yes, criminals need to be held accountable, and if somebody murders someone, if they rape someone, yes, they need to go to prison. But there are people who are in and out, in and out. Those are the issues that we need to address, and helping people to get the help for the deeper issues that they're suffering from.
This has been something years that all leaders have been trying to address. What would be different? Can you give specifics about how we do that under your leadership?
Sure. Well, I think that we can spend our behavioral health dollars perhaps in different ways. When I talk about treatment centers, I think, people need sustained help. I'll give you an example. We visited the Veterans Integration Center. They have beds there. They can go out to a homeless encampment and ask if there's any veterans there. They can bring them back to their location. They can give them an apartment to stay at there at the Veterans Integration Center. They can help them with getting an ID, with opening a bank account, with applying for the benefits that maybe they can, that they deserve and that they can, would help change their lives. And then they follow that veteran for another 6 months to make sure that if they've gotten a job, that they're stable. If they've gotten the benefits they deserve, that they're stable in a place of their own. And so sometimes these things just take a very long time. It's hard to say, go into treatment for 30 days and then you're out on your own. It doesn't work that way for a lot of people, and so we need to change our way of thinking. This is a public health issue, and we need to change our way of thinking about it.
Ms. Haaland, the state's Children, Youth, and Families Department is in a crisis. Your public safety plan says you'll appoint a qualified secretary to lead CYFD, but recently you've said you support a commission to oversee the agency. Which one is it?
Yeah, well, we need a secretary immediately, right? Because the commission is not there yet. I would like to move to a commission model so that there's consistency for the kids. But you need a secretary first, right? You need a leader in place first, and then you can move to the commission model.
Can you give us a timeline on when that would happen?
I can't give you a timeline, but I'd love to start working on it immediately. We'll get a secretary as soon as we possibly can, if I'm the next governor, and then we'll work on a commission model.
Will this secretary have experience in child welfare?
Absolutely, yes. An experienced, qualified secretary, yes.
Also with this, when this, even if we do appoint a secretary, this is the same thing that we've been doing for the past 30 years. We haven't seen much change. And actually it's gotten worse for this department. Can you just at least kind of give us like what it's going to look like? What is CYFD going to look like?
Yeah, so if we essentially start from scratch, you have a secretary in place, you work on the commission model, you get your commissioners in place, they get to work to restructure CYFD on the best way possible. I will tell you that I'm not a social worker, right? I am not. But I will find the right people to work and make sure that we are devising a plan that works to make sure that our children are cared for and that we are doing the best job that we can. One of the things we're short on is foster parents. We can start a program immediately to robustly recruit foster parents into the program to make sure that children have a safe place to be until they can until we have homes for them.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to get just a couple more questions in because we're short on time. But in 30 seconds or less, tell us something New Mexicans don't know about you.
Well, I've been pretty much an open book, but I have a new puppy. A lot of New Mexicans know that. I have a new puppy, Zia. I rescued her from Paca, and she's 6 months old.
Can you tell us one thing you admire about your opponent?
Sure. By all accounts, it looks like he's an amazing dad, and so I think that's great.
I think we have one more time for one more question, and something that has been happening today. There was a hearing because New Mexico passed a new law that bans ICE in counties contracting with ICE in detention facilities. There was a hearing today. The Trump administration is suing the state of New Mexico. Otero County, they still signed a contract with ICE. How would you uphold the state law?
Right. Well, I mean, we uphold the state law, right? I mean, the law was passed. It was passed by the legislature. It was signed by the governor. It's a law that New Mexico can pass and uphold. And so I suppose that we uphold it the way we uphold other laws.
Is that just kicking out ICE and saying, Otero County, you can't do this?
Well, I mean, it's my understanding that I think they extended the contract or something of that nature. And I'm not sure when the law actually kicks in. So, you know, I'd have to look at all those.
It actually kicks in next week.
Okay.
With that, our time is out.
Thank you.
Secretary Haaland, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for joining us for this KRQE primary election special. After the break, we'll have a conversation with the other Democrat on the ballot for governor, Sam Bregman. We'll be right back.
Accidents happen fast. Recovery takes time. But your fight for justice starts now. You need a law firm that fights
And welcome back to our KRQE primary election special, where we are hearing from the two Democrats on the primary ballot for governor. We just wrapped up our conversation with candidate Deb Haaland, and now we're sitting down with her opponent, Sam Bregman.
Sam Bregman is a product of the University of New Mexico and the University of New Mexico Law School. He started his legal career as a prosecutor in the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office as an ADA. A one-time Albuquerque City Councilor, Bregman ran for mayor in 1997. Bregman has also served as Deputy State Auditor and as the chair of the Democratic Party of New Mexico. Bregman's son is Alex Bregman, who won 2 World Series with the Houston Astros. Sam Bregman has had a long career as a criminal defense attorney representing clients in high-profile cases. They include Albuquerque police officer Keith Sandy, who was charged with second-degree murder for shooting to death homeless man James Boyd in the Albuquerque foothills in 2014. The case ended in a mistrial when the jury could not agree on a verdict. Years later, in January of 2023, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham appointed Bregman Bernalillo County District Attorney. Bregman ran for and was elected to the position in 2024. And Sam Bregman joins us live in studio. Mr. Bregman, thank you.
It's good to see you.
Good to have you here. My first question, if you're elected governor, what would be the very first bill that you would like passed?
Well, listen, I've been working on juvenile crime, obviously, for 3 years as DA. We have not updated the Juvenile Criminal Code, the Delinquency Act, since 1993. A lot's changed out on the streets, and we know we have a juvenile crime issue in this community and this whole state. So I would absolutely like to get some changes done to that.
If elected governor, is there anything that Michelle Lujan Grisham, the current governor, has done in her first 7 years that you would seek to undo, or an area that you think maybe she's gone too far in?
No, I don't know that there's an area that she's gone too far. I mean, we can have 20/20 hindsight and look back at COVID and all of that, but I do tell you, I'm excited about the early childhood care and education department. I think that's a great opportunity for really make a difference in this state.
And while we're on that topic, if I may, you talked about, I think that has broad support, but you've talked specifically about concerns about the execution of that plan.
I have, because we know there are child care deserts out across this state. We need to stand up that program. We've got it started. It's a great program. Now we need to make sure it's funded, and we've got the staff to handle it all.
You have been the district attorney for Bernalillo County for 3 years now. And your campaign literature, and I'm quoting now, says you have dedicated your professional life to advocating for the most vulnerable and the voiceless in our community.
Absolutely.
But there are a lot of people who still think of you as a high-powered defense attorney. You had a very successful career doing this, a lot of high-profile cases. And during that time, you have defended people, among them a high-profile case, a man who molested a young boy from the time he was 5 until the time he was 15. Took pictures of this, took video of this. You were his attorney. So the question is, and by the way, you were his attorney when he pleaded guilty to this charge. It's not a question about the acts. So when we hear you say that you speak for the voiceless and the defenseless, how do you reconcile those?
All day long. Listen, I've represented police officers. I've also sued police officers. I've done both of those things. I've stood up for the rule of law and the Constitution. I am a rule of law guy. I've been fighting for the Constitution in federal court and in state court. And when you talk about standing up for the little guy, that's what you have to do. You have to stand up for the Constitution. It's the same reason why I'm trying to hold ICE accountable if they come into New Mexico and do the same kind of stuff that we're seeing them doing in the rest of the country, because the Constitution has to mean something. So illegal search and seizure and things like what ICE is doing out on the streets in other parts of the state, we have to be able to have someone who's willing to stand up to that.
Mr. Bregman, I want to finish this, though. You're talking about a child molester who did the most horrific things, and you're saying you're speaking and defending the most vulnerable people in our community.
Of course.
Isn't that his victim that you should be talking about, and not the fact that you're defending the suspect here?
Dean, I have represented thousands of people in this community and in this state. And I have helped a hell of a lot of people, and I'm very proud of that. I've stood up for people that wouldn't have had a voice otherwise. I've stood up for people that were wrongfully terminated, wrongfully charged. I've stood up for the entire county of Bernalillo and prosecuted not only as a young assistant district attorney way back in the day, but right now we do it every single day. And just to finish this, there's 25,000 cases referred to my office every day, many of them with survivors and victims involved. We have doubled our victims advocates in the office. We have done everything we possibly can to stand up for victims of crime. In my entire career, I've held teachers responsible civilly who have molested kids in the classroom. But I'm a rule of law kind of guy, and I'm going to stand up every time for the rule of law. And that's what I've done throughout my entire career. And you cannot equate, because someone is charged with a crime, with the lawyer that's representing them, that's something bad. Everybody in this country, and I hope this always lasts, deserves the right to counsel. That's the only way our criminal justice system actually will work.
Well, he wasn't just charged with a crime. Let's be clear about that. He admitted to these acts, right?
Let's be
This wasn't someone who was wrongfully accused, is my point.
Let's be clear about this, too. My office right now, every single week convicts another child molester. We've been doing this for 3 years. I personally prosecuted a second-grade teacher who's taking kids into a closet in a classroom and molesting them. He is spending over 50 years in the penitentiary. I take this very seriously. I'm the person who started the sexual assault nursing examiner program back when I was a city councilor in the mid-90s. I'm proud of my record as an attorney. I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to stand up and help so many people in this community.
On the topic of crime, we have had enormous success against crime in the last couple of years, trends going downward. But our own polling, KRQE Emerson polling, a high-quality poll, shows that New Mexicans still rank crime as something they're very much concerned about. In fact, in numbers far higher than the national average. Even as crime is coming down, what do you make of that?
I'm still concerned too. I'm still concerned about the crime levels that are unacceptable in our community here and in the whole state. And I will tell you though, if you don't feel safe to be able to take a walk with your family down a neighborhood street, then we're not doing a good enough job. I'm going to continue to do the better job we can, but violent crime is coming down. Property crime is coming down. I know it because it all crosses my desk. I feel that, but juvenile crime going in the absolute wrong direction. And we have to go after these individuals who are willing to sell and transfer guns to kids. And that bill in the last legislature didn't even get a hearing. That's very frustrating.
And we'll talk more about that. I appreciate that thought. What is the most important thing that you would do as governor to fight crime? Is there a single thing that you think is the highest priority?
And it's not going to be what initially comes to your mind, I'm sure, or many of the viewers, but the single biggest thing we can do to make a difference in crime is have a robust behavior health, mental health, and addiction recovery system that is not only well-funded, but well-staffed and well-coordinated. We don't have any coordination right now. I've been in a courtroom in the morning and a judge goes, I wish I could sentence you, addict, to go get treatment, but there are no beds available. Yet that afternoon, I've been in a rehabilitation center and there's 14 beds available. We're not coordinating, so the Department of Health needs to have a real-time dashboard where every nonprofit that works in the area of treatment recovery and addiction recovery calls in every morning and says how many beds are available. So then, that social worker who's working, for example, in Albuquerque, walks up to that homeless encampment, can pull out that iPad and go, you know what? That person who's hit rock bottom, we've got a bed available for you 2 blocks away. Get in that van. We take you over to that treatment center. You're going to get 3 square meals. You're going to get temporary provisional housing. And most importantly, you're going to get treatment for your addiction. If we don't, see, I can't prosecute our way out of this addiction issue. I can prosecute the drug traffickers all day long that put the poison on the street, and I have been doing that. But we have to help on the addiction side. Too many people are hooked to this drug, which is the worst drug in the history of my lifetime, fentanyl. It has done more damage to human beings than any other drug that we've ever seen on this planet, and we've got to get the folks that are addicted to it the help they need.
And I'd like to talk more about something you touched on. I think it's widely accepted among law enforcement in our community that anyone who wants a gun can get a gun. I don't care if you're a juvenile delinquent, you're a felon, guns are widely available. You have been the district attorney for 3 years now. I don't feel like we have made any headway in terms of eliminating the supply of guns on our streets. Is that a failing on your part? Is there a larger problem? How do we get the guns away off the streets?
It's a larger problem. We've made incremental changes. For example, the Glock switches. We've got a law as far as that's concerned. But listen, no, for 3 straight years, I've been going up to Santa Fe because we need, right now, if you give a gun to a kid that's 15 years old, it's contributing to the delinquency of a minor, a 4th-degree felony. If you give a gun to a 15-year-old, we need to hold you fully accountable. It needs to have some real teeth behind it. I've been very frustrated with the legislature because they won't even hear the bill. A kid right now can go on the Telegram app and in 2 hours go down the street corner and buy a gun from a complete stranger. If he doesn't get hurt in that transaction, God forbid, then he's got a gun, he takes a picture, goes back, takes a picture on social media, gets a bunch of likes. Yeah. It's a real issue. I've provided legislation to our legislature time and time again. When I'm the next governor, we're going to make it happen.
So in the interest of clarity, you support more gun control laws?
It's not more gun control laws. In the interest of clarity, I support making sure we have tough penalties against those people who will peddle guns to kids. And there's a basic idea that kids aren't allowed to have a handgun under the age of 19. Yeah. Why are we letting and not holding the people accountable that are actually selling and transferring these guns to these kids? That's what I want to do. I also, when it comes to guns, we need to go after the felons in possession. We don't have a tough enough law in the books. We need to have something more like the feds have, which really has a hammer. If you've been convicted of a felony and now you have a you're in possession of a firearm, you ought to be hammered as far as I'm concerned, because those are the ones that are out there committing multiple violent crimes.
But Mr. Bregman, how much of this is an enforcement issue, though? Because we all know it's illegal to be a straw purchaser, right? You can't buy a bunch of guns from a gun shop and hand them out. But it seems like that happens routinely in our communities, where you have gun shops selling, they sell a dozen guns to a woman. She hands them off to her teenage son. He sells them on the street. When he runs out, he just comes back and they buy more. No one seems to be paying attention to that gun shop.
I respectfully disagree with you on one part. It's not a law enforcement issue. Law enforcement's doing a great job. I think it's a law issue. It's a statute issue. We need to do better on that. We need to be holding people accountable more, especially those people that are willing to sell guns to kids. Because it's too easy to get done right now, and there's no penalty, even if you know who did it.
Right.
There's no real penalty.
But none of that is legal now, and the only way...
It's a 4th-degree felony right now,
the only way
it needs to be a 2nd-degree felony.
If I may, though, the only reason it seems that we're finding out about these crimes is after the guns have been used in crimes, and then NIBIN brings them all back to one place and they say, oh, this is where the gun came from. What I'm talking about is oversight, where the gun walks out of the shop and people paying attention on that end.
Of course we want the straw purchasers to be held accountable. We want our firearm dealers to be making sure they're doing it properly and not getting firearms into the wrong hands. But at the same time, there are folks out there absolutely straight up committing crimes, or at least giving guns to kids that are then going out and hurting. And we all know kids make bad decisions. But we have people who are more than willing to sell them. I've been working on this issue for 3 years. We're going to continue to work on it.
You know that drunk driving is a massive problem in our state. I've looked at your literature and your campaign, and you're talking about, if you become governor, creating a centralized statewide effort to aid in DWI investigations and prosecutions. I don't see anything in that language about these dirty cops that we've had for decades now who are taking money to let drunk drivers off the hook. So the question I have for you now is, if you become governor, would you commit here to adding to that some sort of oversight where you're tracking cases and you're looking for suspicious patterns and you're trying to make sure we don't have cops doing that?
100%. Let me tell you a couple things. I'm very grateful for the fact that just last year, MAD recognized me as the Community Prosecutor of the Year for MAD. We have an 84% conviction rate when it comes to DWIs, despite certain cops out there and this whole scandal in which we find out we're willing to sell the badge, basically. And we're all disgusted by that. But my office has not let up. We've dedicated 17 attorneys in our Metro division to go after drunk drivers every single day. The results have been really, really good. We have convicted more drunk drivers than ever before with an 84% conviction rate, but we can do more. It's a real issue. It continues. Too many people get hurt out there.
I want to shift now to ICE, something that you have been pretty outspoken about. The Federal Department of Justice, of course, right now suing the state because of its stance against cooperating with ICE. We had a hearing this afternoon in Albuquerque about this issue. Your thoughts on ICE in terms of cooperation, and also I know that you've been pretty outspoken about their behavior in the community.
I have. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been someone who stood up for the Constitution my entire life. And we need to give more than just lip service to the words of the Constitution, but we need to make sure our police officers police constitutionally. I know the police officers trained in this state police constitutionally. What we're seeing from video, social media, and news media coverage from across the country, and certainly in Minneapolis, is not constitutional policing. It's not the country that I grew up in, where somebody with a badge and gun goes up, breaks out the driver's side window and says, get out, and get the F out and prove to me that you're a citizen.
How does that make you feel when you see that?
It's disgusting. It makes me sick to my stomach. It's the same reason I've stood up for the Fourth Amendment my whole life, and that's why I sent a letter to the field office of ICE saying, let me tell you, not only is that unconstitutional in my view, I don't want it here in New Mexico, especially not in Bernalillo County. I am the DA, and I will hold people accountable. If someone with a badge and gun does not have reasonable suspicion, probable cause, or a judicial warrant, and they retain, confine, restrain someone, that is false imprisonment, a crime by definition. We will hold people accountable. If that case is there and those facts are there and we can identify the person that's doing this, I will not hesitate, because no one is above the law just because they have a badge or gun. And that's an example of stuff that we absolutely have to stand up for, because the governor is the last line of defense when it comes to some of the chaos coming out of Washington. And we need to have a strong voice at the bully pulpit and ensuring that we enforce all of our laws as a state.
Mr. Bregman, I want to keep moving here, but I do want to know, ICE does have a legal role to play in terms of enforcing laws. What role do you accept ICE playing in our communities?
ICE is in charge of immigration. I get that. But here's the deal. My office doesn't communicate or work with ICE in any way. I don't care of someone's legal status. If you commit a violent crime, we will absolutely hold you accountable and prosecute you. The concern I'm having, though, and I said this from the very get-go, when President Trump said we're going to round up everybody, we're finding this happening. We know that there are cases in my office where survivors of crimes like rape are not coming forward. Mm-hmm. Witnesses are not coming forward. Why? Because they're afraid that if they come forward and testify, that they or their family will be deported. How is that making us any safer when I can't convict that person because we won't have the evidence, who is an actual rapist? It's making us less safe. And so I firmly believe that instead of just scaring in mass numbers our immigrant community, let's make sure we're going after the violent people who, whatever their legal status is, and hold them accountable at every single instance. And that's what I plan on doing. And as far as immigration, as far as the next governor with immigration, we have a big crime problem in New Mexico. We need our state police, our local police, our sheriffs all across the state, and all of our other federal agency partners that we deal with, FBI, DEA, ATF, all of them to work together to help solve this crime problem. And it's a big issue, and we need to make this community safer, and that's what I want to focus on.
Another issue incredibly important to New Mexican voters, and that is health care. The state is already spending $300 million just this year keeping people on the rolls because of the federal cuts. We've already spent tens of millions of dollars backfilling federal money for SNAP benefits. Yep. The question is, do you support that kind of spending, and is it sustainable ongoing?
I do support it, but it's also why we have to stand up and make sure that we slow down this cuts. I mean, this big, beautiful bill was a direct hit on New Mexico. I'm very proud of the legislature and the governor for backfilling what they did on Medicaid and the cuts to Medicaid. But we have not a health care issue in this state, we have a health care crisis, and we have to have a sense of urgency about it. And I will tell you, they just did some malpractice legislation up there that the governor signed off on. That's an important first step. Here's the deal, though. We're like every state, we all want more doctors. We're the only state in the union that's losing doctors. Mm-hmm. And that's a real problem. So there's things that we can absolutely do right away with a sense of urgency. Sign all the interstate compacts. Eliminate gross receipts tax on medical services. For every year you practice medicine in the state of New Mexico, we'll reduce 1 year of your medical school debt. Rural and underserved areas, if you practice in that area, we'll give you a tax credit. Medical malpractice premiums, dollar for dollar tax credit. And also, at the end of the day, because doctors and their young families are educated, we've got to get rid of this reputation and, in fact, get rid of the fact that we're first in crime and 50th in education. They're not going to want to come here if that's our reputation. We have to fix all these things. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time.
On the topic of keeping doctors, you know that this is a controversial issue. How much of that is losing doctors or not bringing doctors into the state has to do with medical malpractice claims?
Listen, they just passed medical malpractice legislation. They just came together, both sides, the governor. It just got signed. That's an important first step. But here's the deal. I don't want anybody to be fooled thinking that just because that legislation passed, that all of a sudden the doors open and doctors are just going to come in. We have to do so much more. And it's not just doctors. We're 6,000 nurses short. Yeah. This is a real healthcare crisis that we're in, and we need a governor who is going to understand the sense of urgency. Last point about this.
All right,
my mother is 88 years old. She has to wait 4 months for a doctor's appointment. That's not acceptable. And she's not the only one. Too many New Mexicans have to wait too long to be able to see a doctor. And doctors, they're all stressed out because of the workload. Nurses we don't have safe staffing levels in our hospitals. This is a really critical issue that we better get a hold of, and we better do it fast.
And you can't separate this issue from the fiscal. So I'd like to ask you, when you're talking about backfilling federal dollars to the tune of $300 million, more money for SNAP benefits, is that sustainable, and is that fair to the New Mexico taxpayer? That New Mexico raises its hands and says, oh, we'll pay for whatever the feds are not paying. I mean, at what point is that not a sustainable model?
We need to continue to push back and really make sure that we're on the map when it comes to healthcare dollars. But at the same time, I'm emphatic about this. We have $75 billion in wealth funds. There is no New Mexican that should fall through any crack. Listen, I understand it. I don't want to see the Treasury raided, but at the same time, money is not an excuse to let someone and their health suffer. We've got to do, and I'm thrilled with what they did in the short term, but we have to work on the long-term solution, and I think that's working. We're continuing to push back and work with Washington the best we can.
I'd like to move on now to CYFD. It is enormously important to all New Mexicans. We hear the stories every single day. I'm really proud of the work that Jessica Gaudete has done here, covering the stories and exposing the problems within CYFD. I know that you have a plan to separate the juvenile justice aspect from it, from the actual child welfare part of that. Tell me what's the most important thing that you can do as governor to fix CYFD.
Immediately staff it up. The biggest issue right now with CYFD, and we can talk a while about CYFD, the biggest thing I'm seeing and I'm hearing about, and by the way, my office has been batting cleanup for CYFD.
Sure.
In other words, we've seen some horrific things come out. And we have a lot of good people working at CYFD. But here's the deal. When we have a 30% vacancy rate with people and caseworkers who are dealing with some of the most troubled children in our state. So if you have a 30% vacancy rate, the people that are left there are now working double overtime shifts with these same troubled kids. It's really hard. Their caseloads are huge. And I know it works because we did it at the DA's office when I first took office. We only had 78 lawyers. I've hired 80 in 3 years. Why? Because each homicide prosecutor, for example, had 50 cases. Now they're down to 20. Our efficiency and our success on presenting good cases to juries has never been better. And that's because we staffed up. We need to do the same thing with CYFD.
Mr. Brett, where do you find these people? Where do you find that many qualified social workers?
We find them out there by the same way we found lawyers. They said there was a shortage of lawyers wanting to enter in the criminal justice system. We made it an attractive place. We made sure we were paying competitive rates for that kind of social work, for that kind of caseload. And we did it. We can do the same thing in CYFD. I'm convinced of it.
I've been a little astonished watching from the sidelines the different people who have run CYFD. How important is it to have someone who's the head of CYFD who has experience in social work, who has education in that world?
I think it's extremely important. Obviously, we want people knowing the role, and we want people who understand the challenges that your frontline workers face, that their supervisors face, the numbers of all these folks. And I do know that you mentioned, but I do think it's important. I think CYFD has been tasked with doing so many things. They don't do any of them well. We need to get back and get some focus for the different departments within it, whether it's foster families or juvenile justice, for example. We can do these things.
Mr. Bregman, we're running out of time. Very quickly, CYFD, should the governor choose the head of CYFD, or should we have a commission?
I'm open-minded. I think right now we don't want to lose our ability to effectuate change immediately. If the executive's in charge of it, then you can make sure and hold people accountable. My whole idea when it comes to state government is we're going to hold people accountable, just like we do at the DA's office. And by the way, people like that, because we're just ranked as one of the best places to work in the entire state, the DA's office here in Albuquerque.
I've got a couple of questions, and we're asking your opponent these same questions.
Okay.
30 seconds or less.
I have to answer them in 30 seconds or less?
Yes, you only have 30 seconds. People know a great deal about Sam Bregman already in our state and in our community. You've had a long, high-profile career here. What is something that people don't know about Sam Bregman?
That I am so blessed to have 4 amazing grandchildren, all under the age of 4, and they all like to FaceTime me, of course with their parents' helps. They all like to FaceTime me and my wife every day, and it's pure joy.
All right, equally brief, if you would, say something about your opponent that you like, or perhaps something about your opponent that you admire.
That I admire.
30 seconds or...
She's a very nice person. Deb's a nice person. I do question some of her judgment, though, on a lot of things, and I'm concerned by that, but she's a nice person.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Mr. Bregman, we thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we thank you for joining us for this special KRQE primary election special. Our coverage, by the way, continues right now with analysis of tonight's Q&A from the hosts of New Mexico News Insiders. And if you're watching our TV broadcast, you can switch over now to YouTube or the KRQE Now streaming app. You getting this?
Yeah, okay. I've got it all.
To continue watching, also join us next Tuesday for a debate featuring the Republican candidates for governor. That is happening May 19th at 6 p.m. Again, right here on Fox 505, KRQE.com, and KRQE Now. Thanks for watching.
Guys, turning mic on? Mics are hot. All right. 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to this live special episode of New Mexico News Insiders. I'm here with my co-host, Chris McKee, and also KRQE's anchor, Jessica Garathe. You just came off the set a few minutes ago doing a live interview with Democratic gubernatorial candidate Deb Haaland. Thanks for joining us. We're trying something new today.
Absolutely. This is such a pleasure, and I love being able to dissect this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a rare opportunity to be able to have 30 minutes live on TV to talk to either of these candidates. We often see them in forums, that are recorded, and we see
debates.
them after the fact.
Let's just lay that out why this wasn't a debate for viewers.
And we will. We went to both camps. We asked them, gave them couple dates, said, hey, we'd love to do a debate with both of you. Sam Bregman agreed. Deb Haaland did not. She declined. So then we went to Sam Bregman and we said, hey, we'll do a sit down with you. And we went to Secretary Haaland and said, hey,
come on in, Dean.
We're
live.
You are,
hey, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to,
Dean Staley also just got done
with interviewing Sam Bregman. But so we asked both candidates. We put that out there. We asked the Republican candidates as well. We will have a debate with them. They all agreed next week. As far as the Democratic candidates, Deb Haaland said no. We went to Sam Bregman and said, hey, if you want to do a live interview, sit down. We'd be happy to have you. We told Secretary Haaland, you can have a half hour, or we're going to give the full hour to Sam Bregman, and she agreed. So this was a rare that we've seen. One, I think, rare that we haven't had people agree on debates, which is it's pretty odd, especially in a governor's race. And two, that we were able to do like a live sit down interview with them for a half hour. So.
Yeah, and I think our colleague here, Dean, you've talked about this, and I have some of the polling results that we came back with Emerson College polling. I'm not sure entirely if you guys can see this, but essentially Deb Haaland, from what our KRQE poll showed, was 40 points with likely voters here. Sam Bregman seeing about 24, and the undecided still at 36%. So, Dean, I know you've talked about this before, but I mean, the polling kind of indicates the reason why we're probably not seeing a debate here. If you have such a clear advantage, what's the reason to go out and debate your opponent, right?
Chris, you're absolutely right. I mean, as people say, why isn't Deb Haaland debating Sam Bregman? Well, she's up 16 points by our measure. There was another, I think, pretty high-quality poll that had Ms. Haaland up by 20%, right? So this is a running away kind of number. And when you're in that position, as any candidate in any election in any state in the country, you just stay away from your opponent. You just, it's sort of like being ahead in the late rounds of a boxing ring. You just stay away, and you don't give them a chance to catch up, and you don't give yourself a chance to make a mistake. So we were not at all surprised, disappointed, but not at all surprised that Ms. Haaland did not want to debate Sam Bregman. And, of course, Sam Bregman was absolutely rabid about wanting to debate, right? Because he's behind. He's behind also in money. I don't know if you guys have talked about that yet, but, he's got four times the money. If you look at the early numbers from a few months ago, it was like $1 million to $4 million for Deb Haaland, $1 million for Mr. Bregman. And now I think we're closer to like she's at 11 and he's at 3 or something. So that ratio has continued. And you have to remember, Deb Haaland has moved in these Democratic circles for a lot of years. So has Sam Bregman. But she's been in the circles in Washington, D.C., where you pick up the phone with the National Democratic Party and you get a check for $100,000, or you get, there's bigger money to be had from the connections that she has. So
that's
he's
a good
way behind
segue for one of the topics I wanted to bring up, because Jessica asked her about this out-of-state donations that, people have been bringing up online and in the campaign trail. Deb Haaland's gotten a lot of out-of-state donations, and Jessica just asked her in a live interview, how do you square that your interests lie within New Mexico when you have all these big-name donors? How did she answer that?
And we looked through her campaign donations. 70% of her donations come from out of state. But she does talk about that she has had this groundswell and this grassroots effort of where she has a lot of people in New Mexico, she says, out of all her opponents that have given her, she's gotten the most money from New Mexicans out of the other candidates. And she also says that a lot of people, she did launch into the national spotlight
people really enjoyed her as Secretary of Interior, and that she was able to get a lot of support from outsiders. We did take a look at those numbers. I mean, we have more than almost 2 million coming from California. Billionaire J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, also donating, giving her quite a bit of money, and so I did ask her about those and those special interests. Like, are these progressive ideas going to, when you've got those kind of people backing you, how much of that are you looking at when you're trying to balance the interest of New Mexicans? And she made it
Are
really
you now
clear.
tied to their interests? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I thought the quote from her.
No one else is wearing them.
Yeah, well, no,
it's okay. It's a fashion
That's
move.
all right.
On my
It's
part,
a fashion
right?
move.
I can't have this messed
It's
up.
okay.
We didn't have time for an audio check because y'all just got off the set, so
Paid
we're
a lot
totally
for this
good.
hair. I'm not gonna
I
mess it
trust
up.
our producer there. So.
As they say, we'll do it live.
Okay.
So we all know that notorious quote. One of the things, though, touching on that out-of-state donations elements, Deb Haaland sort of saying, we're not on an island, acknowledging that the while this is a role for the governor's office, and while we see our state as having its own individual and unique problems, so much of politics these days touches on what's going on with your neighboring states and how the federal government has, I think, taken issue with, especially in this latest administration, with many of the individual things that states are doing. So, that perhaps plays into the idea that what we're seeing is that a lot of people from neighboring states are very much interested in what we normally consider local politics.
Yeah, and I think too, she brought that up. California, Illinois, all those, that they're going to have to band together and be a force trying to take down some of these President Trump policies. And so, she's like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, that's just, we need to work that way.
Yeah.
As you were mentioning.
The midterms are obviously something that are being watched on a national scale. But I'm curious, from your perspective, Dean, you just got off the set with Sam Bregman, her opponent. He is the current Bernalillo County District Attorney, known for also being a prominent defense attorney, which you kind of pressed him on at the beginning of your interview. He is obviously very passionate about juvenile crime. But what did you feel like differentiated these two Democrats for voters listening tonight?
Well, I feel like Sam Bregman, having listened to Jess's interview with Deb Haaland, I think he's much more energetic. I think he's much more, you feel when you talk to him like he's a guy in the trenches. He's really passionate about juveniles and guns in the hands of kids. It's something he was at the ledge fighting for, and that's a day in and day out kind of thing. That's not I'm the Secretary of the Interior kind of up at 30,000 feet. That's a day in and day out kind of problem where he's prosecuting kids who have guns. So I guess that was probably the biggest difference. He felt to me much more, and maybe just by virtue of the work that he does every day.
Jobs they were both doing.
He's just in the trenches with his job, and I do think he is fighting at the legislature and fighting on the public airwaves to try to move the needle on these things that he cares about. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think you can definitely hear that reflective in their answers, right? You heard a lot more of the things that Bregman says he wants to address. There was a little bit more specificity, I would say, in many of his answers.
I thought so too.
And by contrast, Deb Haaland, I think, is a lot of times recalling her managerial experience from being the head of the Interior Department, a very large apparatus, and reminding folks about, what happens within the various different divisions of that. They have a police agency, they have scientists, they have, a whole smattering of different areas of expertise in the Department of Interior. And that seems to be the callback a lot of times in many of her answers.
Yes, and I really tried to get past surface a lot of times, and it's not just every candidate. They've got these plans and policies and all these great different things that they're going to do, but it costs money, and and so I really wanted to get to the financials. We've seen. We've really added, and we're flush in cash. I mean, New Mexico is, we have a ton of money right now, billions, record budgets. But we've added a lot of different things. I mean, we have universal child care. She's adding, a new Office of Safety to help with crime, looking at new healthcare programs. So I'm trying to tally that up.
Yeah.
And all these different, so you want to, I wanted more specifics just so that we know, as a taxpayer, what are we looking at?
Yeah.
And how do we get there? And so I did try to go into, just trying to get a little bit more deeper into her plans.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff she couldn't say, like healthcare, she's like, I'm not sure, but I'll try to figure it out when I get there. And so that kind of stuff.
She did propose some broader ideas, like going to a public option for healthcare and then creating an Office of Community Safety, essentially, like kind of what Albuquerque has, but on a statewide scale, which is a pretty big apparatus, it seems like. And you did ask her, well, like, what does that look like? And she couldn't really answer because she's like, well, I'm not the governor yet. You know, we'll get there and we'll see. But these are kind of big plans, whereas it seemed like Bregman was like, the first thing I want to do is update the juvenile code because apparently that hasn't been updated since the 90s and it is in need of some revamping, in his opinion. But yes, to your point, Dean, he did seem to come with a little more like specificity, localized issues if voters were paying attention to that. But
I felt the same. I think, you know, sitting down, like watching both as well, with Secretary Haaland, I think what she has is this connection with New Mexicans. Single mom, graduated from Highland, you know, really worked her way up into all these different positions, served Congress, and making all, you know, a trailblazer. And so I do think when she's talking to people, I think she resonates with everyday New Mexicans. And really, like, I know where you've been, and I know your struggles, and I can try to fix that. Like, I feel that's where they kind of have they differentiate, I guess.
I would second that, Jess. And I also think when you look at this number and you say Deb Haaland with 40%, that is not just out of nowhere. And that's not because she has a big pile of money as a candidate. That's real grassroots. That's having been in the party and around New Mexico for a long time and built a reputation. And I think back to maybe Senator Martin Heinrich, who people forget was like a city councilor and then a congressman. And then, I mean, he worked his way up through different positions in a way that it's not just stepping stone from one job to the bigger job, but it's also building a grassroots community where people remember you from being a city councilor back in the day. So I think Ms. Haaland, I think, definitely has that sort of broad-based support in the state. And I think the problem for Sam Bregman, by the way, you look at the undecided is 36% in our polling, and if you're behind by 16, you think, oh, 36, I can move the needle here. Not true. I think most of the pollsters you talk to, that 36%, even though these are likely voters that we poll, they're not all going to show. If they haven't decided at this point in the election between these two people who are fairly well known, you can't count on all of them showing up. And even if they do, well, maybe you split them with your opponent, and then you're not really gaining, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that ground may have been able to be picked up had they been able to kind of go head-to-head in a debate, which we didn't really get to see on this campaign trail, which was
could have been
a little disappointment.
I should note as well that this is a really peculiar primary, right? This is the first time that independents or people who mark decline to state actually can vote with a major party in the primary. First time it's ever happened in a New Mexico election. And so essentially in a primary, it's a semi-open primary. So you're a registered voter, you show up to one of the major party race, or you show up to a voting center and say, hey, I want to vote pick your favorite major party. There's three of them. There's the Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians in New Mexico. And then you can actually vote in that primary. And I think that has been one of the big questions. Everybody wants to know what will be the semi-open primary impact, if there is one, because, let's keep in mind, right, this is a poll of likely Democratic primary voters. So they're not declaring a party necessarily, but
if a large amount of independents show up on June 2nd,
could be
a
difference maker.
I was really interested in this because
we didn't talk about it directly,
how is this going to play a role? And this is the first time we're doing this, so I did some research on it. A couple of things that stood out to me in other states that have this. You don't see these independents coming out to primaries. I think here in New Mexico, this one, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot. One, I don't think a lot of people know about this. We've been reporting it. We've tried to put it out there, but I still think, you can still ask people and be like, what? I didn't know you could do that. Two, we are seeing this mass number of independents and DTS, declined to state. But we also changed another law, so when you go to MVD and you register your vehicle, and if you are declined to state, or if you don't, they register you immediately to vote. And if you don't tell them that you're a Republican or Democrat, they immediately toss you into independent. So I think that's why we're seeing this whole, growing population of independents, but that aren't really independent. So I see. So it's going to be, it's still interesting. And again, when you look at other states that have this, it's still not a strong turnout. And so
We'll see.
And
We'll
we
see
should
come
we should
June, I guess.
along the lines of undecideds, though, I think for the Republican primary question on that same Emerson poll, it was like 60%.
Yeah.
So we haven't heard from the Republicans yet. They did all agree to a debate on our station a week from today, and we'll do this same kind of post-game analysis and see how they fare. But that could also change.
That 60% makes a great deal more sense among the Republicans because they're so unknown. I mean, these are very, very low-profile candidates. I would also say, Jess, I agree with you that we probably won't see some big bounce. It's sort of a novel thing happening during the election this year that we have independents able to vote in the primary. I suspect, and I'm not a pollster. I don't work in, there's a lot of this I don't understand. It seems way beyond me. But it wouldn't surprise me that some year we see some big turnout because you have a candidate that motivates people. That there's some weird dynamic that, like, wait a second, who's this new guy or gal? And I'm going to go vote for her even though I'm not of that party. Right. So I think this is just a year. It's the first year we're doing this, and we have a couple of really known candidates, and I doubt, and neither of them, I think, are motivating people in any massive way beyond their own basis.
Right.
I wanted to ask you guys, having watched each other's interviews, was there a moment for Jess? Was there a moment for you that stood out about Dean's interview in particular? About was it a line of questioning? Like, what was it for you as the person who didn't do the interview that stood out to you?
I love this about Dean because he really has spent a long time dissecting everything and going through these cases and how he's going to approach it, and I really liked that he kept going at Bregman over some of the cases that he has defended. He's claiming to be,
a voice for the voiceless
and the vulnerable. And I appreciate how Dean put it. Well, you defended, a known pedophile and got him a plea deal. And, is that the vulnerable or the child? And so I thought that the way he really attacked that and made him explain really stood out to me. And I also liked, I'm always, curious to see what's going to happen with CYFD. Obviously, I've covered that a long time, and I like that how, I want to see something's got to give and what that looks like on whoever becomes governor.
Yeah.
So
same question for you, Dean. Was there a moment that you homed in on with Jess's interview that stands out to you within that 30-minute discussion there?
I think Jess is as good as anyone at this one-on-one candidate, sort of let me hold your feet to the fire and try to get some real clarity from you. I thought Jess did a great job. Not in any one moment, but just consistently being that person who's saying, I hear what you're saying, but let's get specific. Isn't there more to this? And aren't you missing this? And I want a little more detail about that. And sometimes with a candidate, we all know this because we're all, lifelong reporters, you get to a point where they just won't give you more, right? And especially when you're talking about things that are speculative. And when I say speculative, I mean CYFD, drilling for oil and gas in New Mexico. We just don't quite know what that's going to look like until you get a governor in there and you have some changes to regulation or you have changes to how they structure CYFD. So sometimes as a reporter, you just run right up next to that. And that's all you can do. And I thought Jess did a great job of going right up to that point. And sometimes you get more than others. I mean, you just do. So
that's why I love watching you guys do these candidate interviews, though, because you're both such thoughtful journalists and know when to ask those follow-up questions, which are so crucial for the viewers like us who are trying to differentiate these two candidates and say, okay, this person stands for this. And I also appreciated, if I may chime in, Chris, to your question, that
you're good.
Jessica was able to ask, the kind of the headline question that Sam Bregman has been bringing up in his campaign videos of the Epstein flight. You finally got a chance to ask her about it, and she answered, and her answer was, well, she was paired up with Gary King when she was running for lieutenant governor. He arranged a flight, and she flew to Washington to help with a campaign. But, she said she supports the bipartisan commission to investigate Epstein and seek justice. But she was able to at least address it, right? Because we've only heard kind of the clips and the headlines.
And I do want to add that I covered that story extensively. I talked to Gary King personally about it. He's like, honestly, I don't even remember. I didn't know that it was a company that chartered planes through Epstein. It was one of Epstein's companies. And they had a lot of fundraisers. And Bill Richardson, the governor at the time, had set up a big fundraiser in D.C. and they had a ton here in New Mexico. He's like, I can't I can't find any flights to get me there. He's like, oh, we'll get a charter for you. His campaign paid for it. It wasn't like Epstein was on that flight or that they've ever met them. But Gary King was also very candid too, saying, yeah, I knew him. We sold them the ranch. They were neighbors to us. And
So it was an interesting, but as far as, I mean, he stood by it, all the reporting we did, he stood by that Secretary Haaland would have had no clue. It was just a plane that they chartered. And
that's an important distinction. I think maybe some people are missing, that it was not an Epstein plane.
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein had, I don't know if he had his own planes, but he certainly had the money to have his own planes. A fleet of them probably if he'd wanted. And this was not that. This was him calling his people who arrange rental planes, right? Hey, can you get these guys a flight? And
I don't know that life.
And they got
yes,
reimbursed. Well, Jess and I, if you hang out with Jess and I, you'll get a taste of that life. Yeah.
What stood out to you, Chris, watching the two interviews?
Yeah, I think, if I'm going to take them each individually, I would say that the first thing I would note was, especially when it comes to the issue of data centers, talking about putting more guardrails on data centers from the Haaland perspective. But again, there was not too much of definition there. Even her going back to the idea saying, well, I'm not governor yet. We just kind of let them do what they want to do, or let the project continue, in other words. And then we'll see, keep an eye on it. We'll see what happens, if that becomes true, that she turns into the governor. And I just thought it was, not a really definitive way of answering the question, that sort of surprised me, as the issue has become front and center, where these things get power from, there's just a lot of people raising many concerns with how these data centers are, going to run in the future.
This is really fascinating. I was surprised when she said they don't all need to be here. They don't, basically we don't need these companies with Project Jupiter and other data centers coming here. Why do we have to be the ones? But we have been this whole, like you've heard the governor, you've heard Mayor Keller, we are really pushing for quantum. And if we want to be the leaders in these emerging technologies, without these data centers, how does that work? And so I really wanted to try to get to that balance. Now, she has championed herself as an environmentalist all through Congress. And so this is one of those balancing acts where you're trying to figure out, like, you want the jobs, you want the technology, but you also have to protect. She's got her core base, her philosophy, everything she's fought for has been the environment, and trying to balance that, I think, is interesting. And I just don't know what happens. And I'm still, like, right now trying to find answers. Project Jupiter is trying to come up with, as she mentioned, different energies to it's a lot of water, it's a lot of power, and she mentions that. But, like, okay, you take office, they're already. I mean, they still need some air permits. They still need, but they're full steam ahead. We've been doing stories. Construction is going. I mean, they have. The unions down there we've spoke to are really excited about it. We've talked to the electrical engineers, so I'm just trying to picture what happens to these data centers once she takes off, if she takes office. So
yeah, it also kind of, I think, trends into the oil and gas questions. You asked her, historically she has been against fracking. Is that still her stance? She said yes, she does not, or she doesn't agree with fracking on public lands. There's a thriving oil and gas industry here. She believes that there's plenty of private land to do this on. I wasn't entirely clear at what the answer was about public lands, because obviously much of the oil and gas work happens on state trust land, which I believe is, yes,
yeah,
that is public land.
land.
So, and even in this current administration, there's certainly been a push towards environmental ethics, but there's been a continuation of drilling. And so I wasn't entirely sure on the answer that Ms. Haaland provided about saying that she didn't want fracking on public lands, but there is also
but the drilling will continue.
The problem is, and if you remember when President Biden blocked drilling on federal lands in the state, like during that time, like even the governor was writing him like, this will cripple our economy. Please do not do this. You need to lift this. And so they ended, even Democrats were like, wait a minute, we need to. And so that, I think she is having to tiptoe around that again, because she has been a staunch defender of our environment and the new Green Deal and zero emissions. And we also have to figure out a balancing act on like shifting to that, but also, if we the regulations they're pushing, we have the strictest next to, I think Colorado has more strict regulations than we do, and California, and then it's us. And if we keep putting more regulations and become the strictest, like those companies can easily go to the Permian Basin in Texas. And so
it's a balancing act because, for context, New Mexico is the second largest oil producer in the country. So that's a big moneymaker for us.
Do you guys remember when Michelle Lujan Grisham was in our studio and during the debate, and this was when she was running for governor, and she said, "I'm going to end fracking." She just said that. And I remember just being drop-jawed like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? I think there's an interesting sort of environmental gene or environmental sensibility about some of the Democrats who feel like, oh, fracking's just bad, we got to, without an understanding of the fact, and I'm not a petroleum expert by any means, but the Permian Basin, for people who don't know, straddles Texas and New Mexico. It's a pretty old place to be drilling for oil, and it wasn't until fracking came along. I mean, there were wells that they were shutting in because they were no longer productive. Right. Then fracking comes along, where you can shoot this mixture of liquids and solids, sand, some sort of, and it's all proprietary. The oil companies won't tell you what's in it, into the ground to open up these seams so that the oil starts flowing. Right. So this suddenly sort of was the rebirth of the Permian Basin, and if you couldn't frack, no one would be working in the Permian Basin. I don't think that you could get the oil out of the ground. Now, if oil goes to $300 a barrel, who knows where it's going now? But traditionally, if you're talking about $60, $70, $80 a barrel, fracking is the only way that makes the Permian Basin, I think, pencil. So I think there's a strange disconnect where there's this idea that fracking is just bad, we're going to get rid of it. And it's like, no, there's no way to do this without fracking. You can't take oil out of the ground in New Mexico or Texas without fracking. And also, if you're not going to do it on public lands, guess what? You're shooting that into the ground on private land that's right next door. So if you're worried about the water table, if you're worried about environmental concerns, now that's very different from the environmental concerns about, are you flaring methane? Are you doing, there's all kinds of pollutants and stuff to do with oil drilling that I know that you can get more or less serious about if you're going to be environmentally conscious about it. But this fracking thing, to me, I feel like is not always that well thought out by people who say, I oppose it. It's like, okay, you oppose it. And then Michelle Lujan Grisham, by the way, did not spend 7 years trying to end fracking.
No.
She did not. Yeah. That it did not happen. Not even close. And whatever regulation was put on drilling for oil in New Mexico had to do with other environmental concerns. It was not a fracking ban.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left. I'm looking at the clock over there, but I want to also address another huge issue in New Mexico, which is CYFD, which you both were able to ask these candidates about. Both kind of said, we need a qualified leader at the helm. Sam Bregman said he's open to, options. Deb Haaland said she would like to move toward a commission model, but needs a good leader at the helm first. What, in your guys' view, made their ideas different for CYFD?
Listening to Sam Bregman, and we were getting, just for clarity, with Secretary Haaland, we were close to the end when I was asking that, so we didn't get as much into it as they did. With Sam Bregman saying, we got to look at the workers and getting workers, and that has been an issue. But a lot of it has been because you've had leader after leader, the turnover, and they're told, okay, this new leader comes in and you need to do this, and then the new leader comes in and, well, we're going to do it this way. And so the morale has been down. Plus, you're just dealing with day to day the worst cases that you would ever have to live with. So, that was interesting to me, recruiting the workers. And I thought with Secretary Haaland that she is looking at a commission, which I really think. I mean, we've had covering this for so long. We've had 30 years of governors appointing, and it's just gotten worse. It's time for us to see some sort of substantial change. And this is what lawmakers are going to be pushing. And let's, look at a commission that's going to look at what's best for these kids. And I think she'll be moving. She's looking to move towards that. So what I got
some
out
consistency,
of it, for some consistency, and that it is a priority for her.
Okay.
Yeah, we got about a minute left, and the diverging viewpoints there. One of the things Sam said was, staff up very quickly. He put a lot of emphasis on that. Secretary Haaland really putting an emphasis on consistency and making sure that we just, she said, couldn't give a timeline, but wants to work on the problem immediately and move towards a consistent change, if you will.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I also appreciate just that you asked them to say something nice about each other at the end. So Sam said, well, she's a nice person. And Deb Haaland said, by all accounts, he seems like an amazing dad.
Let me call out Sam Bregman, though, because he backed out of it very quickly. He goes, she's a nice person. I'm not sure about her judgment. So I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Hey.
He did have a little caveat in there and said, well, I question some of her judgment, but she's a nice person.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys so much doing the candidate interviews, rushing over here to us.
And you. And we appreciate the work you do.
Absolutely.
This is a great program.
Thank you.
We love
Thanks for tuning in to this live episode of New Mexico News Insiders. We'll see you next time.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys coming in and doing this. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you
Fox
for
505 feed. Morning, night, I don't care.
I call you on the morning.